Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Directors meeting, Monday, November 14th, 2018. We'll start with owner's comment period, and I see that 3 have identified that they would like to speak. Gerald Barr. We'll start. Good evening.
Good evening. Gerald Barr, 1138 Mosaic Drive. I have a couple of comments about our new magazine. One, I think the pictures and the printing, it's so clear and so forth, but anyone that knows me knows that I'm really not one for testimonials. So I have 2 comments I'd like to make. The first one is you have a calendar here, and you as a board have identified the fact that you want community involvement, etc. And I only see one meeting here, the ARC meeting. We have any number of other important committees, and I would suggest that all of them be listed on the calendar. That's the first thing. The second thing is, in a position of prominence, is this article about CAI. CAI is a trade association. I see no byline. In terms of transparency, I see no disclaimers from either any board members or any members of CCMC who may be officers, directors, committee chairmen, or have positions of importance in CAI, and I don't understand why this particular article is right in such a prominent position. However, perhaps if you're going to have a trade association get such a prominent position, it's usually a practice that a trade association would also take a prominent ad in the magazine. Perhaps I missed it. I looked for it, but I didn't see it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Finney.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Finney. I've been a resident of Celebration for 18 years. And my wife and I are avid tennis players and take great interest in what's going on with the tennis courts. We feel that we were somewhat responsible for getting 2 of the new courts built. And we now have a situation here in Celebration where the tennis pro, who has been here now for I don't know how many years, I think at least 5 years, has really established a big business here to the point where it seems to be dominating the use of our tennis courts. And we have a real problem with that. There are many times when you can go out there and he's playing on 3 of the 5 tennis courts and you just can't get out on a tennis court to play. I understand that the residents, want to be able to get lessons. It's an important thing for residents to be able to do that. We're not a tennis academy here in Celebration. These are courts that are designated for the use of the residents. And so my wife and I are here to represent the residents and say that we really would like to have a little more control over the use of the courts. The pro, I guess, is giving us some money for using them and doing these lessons, but he's making a ton of money at the expense of our court usage. And so my wife is going to talk a little more in depth about that and the amount of time that's being used by him for this, but I'd really like you to consider this. Apparently you're going to be negotiating contracts or discussing contracts tonight. And so when you're doing that, would you please, think about us as residents as opposed to, Darren Holt, and, there just doesn't seem to be any limit to him growing his business, and that's what I have a problem with. It's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and he's tying up our public courts for our residents. So I appreciate you,
Good.
taking that into consideration, and my wife will talk a little more about that.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I see that Diane Finney is also desirous of speaking.
Hello, I'm Diane Finney, 1230 Wright Circle, number 105. And we go back to enjoying tennis here in Celebration since we moved here. We were told by salespeople that there would be a tennis facility with a little stadium, perhaps a pro shop, and when that didn't happen, it was supposed to be next to Siena. $500,000 was given to CROA. At that time, it was put into a community improvement fund, which got frittered away until I brought it to everyone's attention that that originally was tennis court money. So then the 2 courts were built. The problem has been pros. I'll briefly say the history. There was a pro, the last name, Dublin, Mike Dublin. He used to have an affiliation with with Disney, actually, and used the courts over there at one of the resorts for the tennis teams that used to play. 2 of our 3 sons played on the varsity tennis team, so we're familiar with what was available and what wasn't. The thing is that Mike stepped out, Darren Holt stepped in to cover for him, and Darren's been a very good, I guess, business manager and negotiator, apparently, with CROA. If you look at, if you just Google this yourself, Advantage Tennis Celebration, which is his company, Advantage Tennis, it comes up describing him as a tennis management company for the town of Celebration. I, as a dues-paying resident, somewhat resent a professional business person coming in and managing tennis availability for residents. I've had some health issues. I've been told by a doctor that to exercise. My husband is my partner, you might say, and we try to get out there every morning. So we've been aware of just how much use the tennis courts have been taken over by Darren Holt, a private individual making money. I'd like to just make a comparison that if you were on a hot day, you wanted to go for a swim in the swimming pool, we have several in Celebration to choose from. And our dues, again, that we pay, give you access through a locked gate. On any, let's say you were dealing with the situation we are down at the courts. You could go and wait at a swimming pool and wait, and the courts were the swimming pool is dominated by someone giving lessons not to save lives, but actually to, let's say, do synchronized swimming, something fun but not necessary. All those synchronized swimmers will eventually find out that they can't swim anymore because of a private individual.
So, time is up, so we thank you for your comments. I think we've heard what we need to hear.
Can we have, Steve, can you answer the ones about the calendar? I'm sure we can improve on that. I think that was our first shot at putting the calendar in. That.
Yeah, Susan and I both wrote that down as a note to talk to JR about.
That's a good idea. I like that
idea.
It's a good idea, yep. And that CAI ad?
Would you like to comment on the CAI?
I wrote the CAI article at the request of the board of directors, and so.
I guess the prominent location kind of.
I don't know. I don't know about.
So I think the point of byline is fine.
It was like on page 30 something. It wasn't on page 5 or 10.
So for these others, we have the tennis piece as an agenda item tonight, so let's discuss that then. But thank you for your comment.
I would like to just address the calendar. If these are the hours posted down on the board at Park and Rec, it's inaccurate. It's not showing a free session open to all tennis players that my husband operates on Wednesdays. On page 26 of the Celebration News is a schedule that you can refer to, which really shows all the hours and courts.
Okay, so we'll look at that for consistency. We'll make sure that they do that. Thank you. No one else has checked. Is anyone else desirous of having public comment at this point? Okay. Steve, can I verify that the meeting's been properly noticed?
Yes, it was.
And verify quorum?
Yes, you do.
Thank you. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we'll formally call the meeting to order and have a motion to adopt the agenda.
I move to adopt the agenda with one change,
Okay?
and that change would be to remove tab 22, I believe it is.
Okay?
What is tab 22? You mean action item 22?
Action item
Actually,
22.
item 22, I'm sorry.
So we're deferring that.
Yeah, I want to remove it from tonight's agenda.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second with that?
Second.
And another modification?
Yeah, I wanted to move, we've got the gentleman here from Los. I was hoping we could move him up to be action item number 1, so he could just, we could do it, and then he can move.
Right,
What
so
number is he?
moving 23 to number 1, is that correct?
He's number 4.
Number 4?
Let's just move number 4 to move.
I'm sorry, number 4. Reading the wrong one. Okay. With those two modifications,
Then we can just address item number 4.
we'll just address item number, we're not changing the numbers, we're just addressing item number 4 before item number 1. With a motion from Jackson for the motion and a second from Brian with those two modifications, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion adopted. Just a quick comment, and I was going to congratulate JR and his team for a spectacular Founders Weekend, starting with the carnival, and then we moved on to the concert, the parade, the photo, the lunch. Hundreds of people, or little elves, or I guess that's the wrong month, seem to be helping and turning things around very quickly. So I just wanted to offer my thanks to JR and the team for a marvelous Founders Day weekend.
Thank you. I'll make sure to pass that on to him.
Please.
Absolutely.
He's probably still recovering.
Yeah, they did a great job.
I mean, they were here late at night on Friday and then early in the morning on Saturday. He probably had a cot in the middle of Market Street or something.
They're catching up on a little bit of rest, and then they're getting ready to get the holiday festivities going.
And thank you, Debbie.
Yeah, and all the volunteers.
Yes.
Lots of good planning. Approval of minutes. We have board workshop 10/1/18. We have board meeting 10/29 and CROA board workshop 10/15/18.
Motion to approve?
Motion approved from Debbie.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kevin. Any discussion on those? I know we had some correspondence, and I think those have been corrected
They have.
already. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. So we have committee reports. Start with ARC.
Thank you. Good evening, Michael Valiquette, Chairman of ARC. In October, we had 109 applications reviewed. 106 were approved and 3 were not approved. The top requests in October were 29 exterior painting, 18 landscaping, 18 roofing, and 14 security devices. That's it on the reports. The ARC would like to remind everyone that all exterior changes must be submitted to the ARC for formal review. The front desk at Town Hall has hard copies of the applications, or they can be downloaded directly from the Front Porch website. If residents have any questions regarding the application process or need assistance in compiling their application package to ARC for review, please reach out to Community Standards, who aren't here tonight, and at here at Town Hall. I'll be happy to assist you, and thank you for keeping Celebration beautiful. Any questions for the ARC Chairman while I'm here from the board? Yes.
Mike, are there any special categories of things on those 3 denials that people need to know about that aren't being approved in general? Or
No, it's usually
just
something. It's just usually something that they're
It's a
asking for.
unique
something.
thing they were asking for.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, you know, like one of them was a bicycle rack out in the alleyway, visible outside the private area where they could stack bikes up high. Things like that, where there hasn't been any appeals that I can recall, that I know of anyway, that have come back to you guys. So, but no, I don't think so. I think we've got a pretty good handle, and the public understands what they can and can't do. Anything else?
Are you all, I know Covenants has regular articles. Are you all doing any
Articles in
the Celebration News?
No, I was
Is
going
that something you might consider?
Well, actually, I was going to bring that up at some point in the not-too-distant future, because on Sanibel, when I was chairman of the commission there for all those years, I actually had a weekly article in for public informational purposes. If you would like me to start doing that, I'll check with the ARC committee, make sure they don't mind, but I can't imagine they would.
The more communication, the better, and staying ahead of the curve. I think Covenants has done a marvelous job in conjunction with staff. I think it's volunteer and staff together doing articles. And I think that's helpful in changing a lot of the public awareness, and I think Vaughn's question is an excellent one. The types of things that get turned down, without pointing fingers, but it's the types of things that people should think of as they submit an application.
No, I'd be happy to.
Good.
Be happy to.
You can talk about the hurricane shutters.
Yeah, we could do that. The roll downs.
This is
Yeah,
all-
no,
this is
I know,
all-
people need to know, they
this
don't
is all good.
understand. They don't,
This is all
they go
good.
through all the trouble of applying for something that if they read an article about it, they know they wouldn't get it.
So if JR were here, he would say the deadline for the January celebration news is probably December 7th to 10th?
He's got the 7th, and
Yep.
then
7th?
7th is what
It is the
it's gonna
7th.
So
Okay.
usually.
So if you're thinking about
before,
Happy New Year,
Mhm.
et cetera, just a consideration.
Do I have to put my picture in it? Well, Jerry's is in there.
Byline, I would recommend. Picture,
I don't think your picture's in there, is it, Mr. Anderson?
Oh, now you're,
now we're talking.
I'd be happy to do that. I was going to bring that up at one of the meetings, but I didn't want to.
If we need pictures, we
want
can
to move too
whatever.
fast. I just didn't want to move too fast, so.
Pictureless. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your consideration.
Jerry just looks cool in his pictures.
What, like this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see who can do the best Jerry.
you got Mr.
Thank you,
Fair.
Mike.
Anything else? Any
Thank
other
you.
questions?
Anyone else? Thank you.
Anyone else?
Covenants is next.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, thank you.
Covenants compose like Jerry.
Covenants can do what, a picture? Oh, they can do a Jerry, yeah. Jerry's gonna look at this and, anyway.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Stephen Fromfelder, Chairman of the Covenants Committee. In October, approximately 300 inspections and re-inspections were conducted on single-family and service area homes. 30 resale and follow-up inspections were also conducted. 141 new and completed ARC projects were also reviewed by our inspectors. 151 emails were sent for minor items, and approximately 67 letters were sent for major items or multiple minor items. 35 properties were reviewed in the October meeting. 23 proposed fines were rejected by the committee. 7 proposed fines were tabled, and 5 proposed fines were confirmed by the committee to be returned back to you, to the board. The inspectors continue to drive through the community and conducting routine inspections every 6 weeks and have reference materials in the NEVs with them to assist homeowners. The community standards team is also ready to work with each homeowner or citizen at Town Hall. So if you should so get a notice, we encourage you to contact them as soon as possible, and they can assist you with the timelines, be it applications for ARC or a maintenance plan. Again, thank you to everyone for all your hard work in keeping Celebration looking beautiful. Subject to your questions, I have nothing else.
I do have one question. I saw that Walter Akana resigned from the committee. Is that correct?
Yes.
That means we have an opening on?
We actually have, yes, we have an opening.
Have we advertised that, and have we followed the process that we laid out a few months ago for how this would work in terms of appointing new members to these committees and making it public? That's really more a question for Susan Stevens.
I don't know that we've advertised for it. I'll find out from Tony.
Not specifically. We have an ongoing Friday Flash call
Right.
for volunteers, but not specifically for this
That
position.
ARC, right. I will tell you that we do have a plan moving forward, and we do collect resumes of residents who turn in interest forms when we do the call for candidates and push it so hard around the election time.
So do we have anyone on a waiting list right now for that committee?
Pardon me?
Do we have anyone on a waiting list?
No, we do not.
Okay.
Then we should change the Friday Flash to say we have an opening.
An opening for covenants.
Yeah, and yes, it's in the Friday Flash, and yes, it has a link for application.
But a specific, we need to know, we need to flag it more specifically to this.
Okay.
I have a comment or an observation, and this may be a question that you all can think about. Since this board has been convened in March, I think we've had 3 appeals hearings, which seems less than before. So that's what it seems to me. We've just had a half a dozen appeals over the last 8 months. So my question is, this may be a research thing, how does that compare over prior years? My memory from prior years.
I don't know,
I think we've had at least 4, but I don't think you really can compare it because that's based on the homeowner making an appeal. It's not.
Right, so it just seems there's greater, it feels like there's greater compliance and less appeal, is what it feels like to me. Is that a fair?
I would say.
Dream on.
I can dream on?
Well, I think in the past, we've had them regularly once a month, and this year, they have not been.
Because we haven't had them.
Once a month. I think you're right, maybe 4 this year so far.
Yes. There has been less appeals that have been processed in the last year. I would say partly to improvements in the process. I think it has also been better communication with the residents and homeowners.
And your monthly articles?
Monthly articles, and I believe we have also been working out plans with actual homeowners when they come in to our hearings, and they give us a plan of action and that we move forward. There have been instances, just for a situation, they had 10 items, they corrected 9, 1 was being corrected as of that day and had not been completed because it was dark, and therefore, instead of just holding that open and doing a finding process, a member of the committee makes a recommendation at that time and let us table that 1 item.
Yeah.
And therefore, that 1 item is corrected, and then we did not have a finding process.
So I just would encourage you to take a look, query yourselves, see what is going well, let's keep doing what's going well, see what can still be improved, and just keep down that positive
Yes,
path.
sir. We are in the midst of doing a very intensive deep dive into metrics and finding out where we have been doing it.
Good.
Focused on the last year.
And we'll look forward to hearing that report whenever that is ready.
David,
Please.
a different topic if I could.
Yes, sir.
I received a phone message about an hour before our meeting tonight from a resident who indicated that they had become aware of a group house in Celebration that was housing perhaps 10 to 20 young women under the age of 17. I don't have any details at all, but I think it's important to raise the question and ask how that should be processed. I think a phone call to a CROA board member may not be the best way to handle it, but this has come up. Apparently several other members of the board are aware of it. Can you comment at all?
I have no knowledge of it, and therefore I would have to also look into.
And
Well, I
Steve,
think we have
how
to follow the
would this be
process, though.
resolved?
So this is, tonight's the first I've heard of this. So we just need to get with Tony tomorrow morning, ask her to look into it. Most likely it will be a call to the homeowners. We do need to get some proof of this violation, any proof that we can get, signed affidavits from neighbors, pictures, those types of things. And then we'll begin the process. It's an egregious violation, so you can begin the finding on 1 incident. If we get an affidavit or anything that supports what's taking place there, we'll begin the process immediately. But it has to come in front of the board first. You have to initiate the fines. Then it has to go in front of the covenants committee to
So
either
the first step
uphold or-
really is for your staff to go out and
Do an
research
investigation.
what's going on, is that correct?
Yes.
And I've heard about these signed affidavits before. That is not a requirement, it is just a step in the process that could be added, am I
You
correct?
want as much evidence as you can to win the case if it goes to court ultimately. So that's, while it's not a requirement, if we don't have, if it's a weak case, we possibly won't be able to win it, and our goal is to stop those from happening. And the board, since I've been here, 4.5 years now, has not wavered at all on the fact that it's a zero tolerance policy for short-term rentals, and that's still in play.
And that would be the, I assume, if there is a group home, that would come under covenants violation for short-term
That
rentals.
sounds like a short-term rental.
And perhaps a business being run out of a residential
Possibly.
property, is that correct?
Possibly.
The affidavits were recommended by the attorney
It
when
was.
we had a situation like that a couple years ago. So that's where that came
The
from.
I'm asking about the affidavits because I've heard from people that neighbors don't want to write an affidavit, but that's not a reason to not investigate.
No, we absolutely will investigate, but if we have no evidence, it's hard to begin that violation process. But again, I think with that, we always want to begin with the end in mind and say, if this was to go all the way to court, what do we have in the attorney's evidence bag to be able to use to win this case?
And if by what you've said, if there is a county ordinance violation or a state law violation, that gets dealt with
We'll
with
certainly submit it to
those
them.
authorities immediately for them to investigate. Is that
We'll
correct?
submit it to them also.
Yeah, so I would ask if anyone's watching this video or anybody in the audience is aware of whatever this situation is, that you would contact Town Hall and present whatever information you have.
And that's usually how we find out about short-term rentals in these types of violations, so.
I mean, this has the
But I'm
potential
hearing
to
more
be
than
something
short-term
more than
rentals.
just a covenants rentals problem.
I'm
It
hearing
could
more
be
than
a
that
deeper-
from just your brief description.
Well, if it's anything criminal, then it would be investigated by the sheriff's department also.
Yeah.
And we pass that on immediately. I mean, that's not something we let them
Right.
investigate
We have
immediately.
no enforcement authority over criminal activity. That would
Absolutely.
definitely go to the sheriff's.
Okay, just, thank you for raising that. Anything else? Thank you for your good work.
Thank you.
Thank you for your articles and pictures. Next committee report, dog park.
Dory Moyer, I'm standing in for Maureen Stalweg. She's at a meeting tonight. She couldn't make it. So I just want to update everybody. We had, our last meeting was Thursday, November 1st, and our next one is December 6th, and we meet at 9:30 in the morning. Just to let you know, as you all know, we've been working on the rules and regulations signage, rules and regulation registration, incident reports, and recommended enforcement. And this is probably one of the newest committees, but I have to say it's probably one of the most passionate committees I've been on, and hardworking. And I think they're doing a great job. And just last month, if you remember, at the last meeting, you had brought up about the legal opinion, and at that time I didn't have it, but we did get it shortly after that. And I'll touch base on that for just a second, but I just want to say that just a shout out to the committee that the attorney stated, he said, frankly, these documents have been very well drafted. So I thought that was, great, and that just shows how the many hours are spent in trying to get it right, because the safety and well-being of the dogs at the park, as well as residents and children, is paramount. That's very, very important to this committee. So I think they're doing a great job. So you had asked what it was, and it wasn't exactly what we thought, but we did make a change. And behind the scenes, the team has been working on the signage, and we had one signage, but we updated it, and this is what it looks like. It's more streamlined. And one of the things that we did we made a couple changes and added the registration and website. And again, it's a combined effort of everyone. But what he had asked us about we had put in there about adult residents, and he said based on the Fair Housing Act that we can't really put discriminate against children, so they wanted us to put supervising residents, and we've made that change. And then he added one additional comment: any resident supervising a dog or dogs pursuant to these rules must be sufficiently experienced to safely handle the dogs in the dog park environment. So we made the changes that he recommended, and we have pretty much have that wrapped up. So that's the signage. The registration, he made some comments, and we had some changes on that, so that's done. The incident report he also approved, so that is done, and also the recommended enforcement. So we have all that approved, so that's all being put together. The sign, they're working on the sign behind the scenes, and we should have that done pretty soon, and I think that's well done. As well as adding additional signs for people to pick up after their dogs, which is really, really very much important. The other thing is we were working on fundraising endeavors, and we had an article in the new magazine, which was very nice, and we are continuing that. And we are putting also Maureen's, and I guess maybe different people are going to come up with dog park articles each month for the safety of the dogs, which I think is also important. And then the final thing, which we discussed last week, or last month, was the lighting. And right now, where we are, the thought was that perhaps we could use the funds we have and purchase the lighting, and then eventual funds we would promise, but we decided that it was probably not a good idea to promise funds we didn't have, because we don't know in 3 months from now, when there's a new committee or new members, whether they're going to have the same passion, and we really don't think we should promise something that we don't have. So at this time, we probably will not be able to do the installation, and then I'm going to leave it up to the powers that be as far as purchasing lights and do you have anything on that? Any comments, Todd? Okay, so other than that, we're just kind of going to sit there on that for a while until a recommendation is made, and we're just going to follow whatever the board decides. So we're just going to sit there happily and go to the dog park and enjoy life.
We're still going to continue the fundraising.
Oh, absolutely.
initiative.
Oh, yes, we're not going to stop. So we have the potential to raise about $35,000, I think, to add to the 2012. So but that's going to take some time.
So tomorrow, if you, Todd, and I can just touch base real quick and I want to just look at the numbers again, and we can talk about them.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever seen a formal proposal on numbers that I can remember.
In terms of lighting?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I want to see what that difference in installation is. And we can look to see what kind of operating dollars.
Okay.
But we'll talk about it.
Okay.
So several points. Were you going to?
No, go ahead.
So, first of all, thank you all for your good work, and then the attorney's comment, I think, is noteworthy. And just to go back to part of what you all did, Maureen or whomever shared, the research that you all did to find out best practices, so I think that's noteworthy. I assume that when all this is approved, it'll go on the website.
It will.
And it may defer till the new website,
Yes, it
depending
will.
on timing. And just a note on that, the CII listserv, someone was calling for good examples of dog park things. I was reluctant to put our name out there yet. I'll forward that to you so that when things are readily available electronically, then that can be shared nationally through CII, because that was posted about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
I think it's a great opportunity for us to get our word out.
We're very close to
So the
completion.
articles you talked about, I hope that you'll have a byline. I think there were 2 in the Celebration News this time, and it was implied it was from the Dog Park Committee. It would be nice to state that it's from the Dog Park
Okay.
Committee.
I'll make a note of that.
And then I think the last discussion on lighting was, we're really waiting until we get into the whole Parks and Recreation Master Plan process, weren't we not?
I mean, that was part of it, but we were waiting to hear your feedback on my proposal of whether you would pay us back eventually, and we still haven't seen numbers, because Steve had different numbers for me than you had for
Exactly.
us.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, it'll be good that we get together and we
No,
finally.
that's fine. What are the facts?
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else?
So other thoughts?
No, just I think it'd be great to have a proposal on the lighting, just so we can have that ready, if we're able to move that along any sooner.
And then philosophically, to decide whether we cost share or fund it.
Exactly. So we'll wait and we'll get the numbers and we'll put it together and we'll meet back and
Good.
talk about
Yeah,
it.
it's helpful to have the facts.
I agree.
Thank you. Go ahead.
You're probably doing
Dory, was it
recreation.
Tom Slayton that looked at that?
I'm sorry?
Was it Tom Slayton? Who was the attorney?
It was
Rick
Richard Larson.
Larson.
Does Tom need to look at this too? I mean,
Rick Larson is the head of Larson and Associates, so Tom was in court and Rick.
Oh, okay.
Same company.
Same value.
Okay.
Are you doing recreation?
Oh, well, I'm just going to state that we have not had a meeting since the last meeting, so our next meeting is the 26th
Okay,
of
so no
November.
update on recreation?
No
per se.
update.
You're going to say something more on dog? Okay. Anything else on dog park?
Well,
Go ahead.
not on the dog park, but the recreation committee, if I could.
Please.
Since we've already had the comments from the Finneys about tennis, the recreation committee looked at this contract. Can you summarize what, if anything, you discussed about the tennis agreement?
Yes. Well, we started with the RFPs, and we had a number of different tennis companies come out a little over a year ago. And we interviewed them, and they came, they did a proposal and a presentation. At that time, was the year before, was when we did the booklet. And one of the things that was in, that people wanted in this town passionately, was for us to step up our game on some of these professional sports, swimming, tennis, and so on. So we interviewed them, and some were off the charts, but he fit best with his community. The thing about it is that yes, he does make a living on this, but he also, there's a percentage that is given back to the CROA, the town, whatever. So it's not just all going into his pocket. So the more successful, I mean, I actually was excited to hear that he's doing so well, because that's what we wanted. That was the goal, that he does do well. And, you know, I live down there, and the tennis courts, you know, are not packed, and people aren't waiting in line. And it all depends on what time of day, and, you know, school in, school out, summer, temperature, and so on and so forth. As the temperature's cool, there's probably more people out there. But in fact, what he is doing is exactly what we were hoping for as a committee. So I understand the need and the want to be out there, but most of the time there's at least one court available most of the time. Sometimes, no, but most of the time. So I think that he's doing a great job. He has, when we interviewed him, he had a packet like 5 times this size of recommendations of people in this town, and that's why we really went with him, because he's really family-oriented, and they love him. So I don't think that I would make any change at this time, because I think that he's doing what we wanted, and we're very excited about that. And thus, the committee made the recommendation on a list, as I mentioned last meeting, that we didn't have them come in this time around because the numbers were up, there were no violations, they were following the surveys, they were doing everything they were supposed to do. So there was no need to at this time, this year.
So who controls the booking of the courts if a resident wants to book it that's not taking lessons with him?
Right.
But we do not do bookings of the court outside of team tennis, the lessons, those things. We haven't gotten that far as a community yet to allow individual residents to book. It's certainly something we can look at if we want to move down that road, but right now, all of the bookings for the tennis court through our program provider and the team tennis are all on RecPro, and any resident can access that through their mobile phone and look to see, or online, and see whether the courts are being used or not, and can go down there if they're not booked.
And part of his contract, correct me if I'm wrong, is he does get the 3 courts for teaching. That's part of his contract.
He gets 3 out of 5 courts.
For certain times of the day.
The times of
certain times.
3 out of 5?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In the morning?
The busiest times of the day.
Best times to play, early morning, late afternoon.
Yeah,
So that's in the contract, which you've gone over.
Okay. And I think to add to what Dory said, this was an initiative driven by the CROA board, wanting to provide the highest quality recreation programs that we can. And the board put together a task force to put together a recreation program plan. That included a recreation needs assessment, which was a survey of the community. And as Dory stated, tennis was high on that need assessment. And then the board took the task force and turned it into a committee. And that committee is ongoing reviewing contracts and program providers within the community to ensure that they remain at that high level that we're asking for.
Anything else on that at this point? Okay, so let's move to special events. I assume you're up for that? Oh,
No.
assume you're up for that? Special Events Committee.
Okay, as David, you said earlier, it's true, the team wrapped up a successful Founders Day weekend lineup this past weekend, and the staff has received plenty of positive feedback, especially with Friday activities where family enjoyed the carnival rides, which was something new, and lots of activities and games. And the response for Mac McAnally concert was tremendous. The residents expressed their appreciation for bringing such a talented performer to the community, and all those who were there, I think, really would agree with that. On Saturday, the community came together once again to celebrate the anniversary and to honor our veterans. The morning started with our parade through town, followed by the Veterans Ceremony at Founders Park, which included a musical prelude by the K-8 Wind Ensemble and an awesome flyover. Then it was back to Lakeside for the town photo and the town picnic, where 600 people were served. I and our committee would like to give special shout out as David mentioned, to the amazing team and staff who truly make it look so easy as they set up, they break down, they relocate, they come back, they set up, they break down, and then pack up. And I said it's truly magical. Over the years, I think it's magical to watch them, and greatly appreciated. It was also great. We all talked about it at our meeting yesterday. Debbie and Kevin were there, and seeing so many of our CROA board members and our town hall staff, and all the events throughout Founder's Day. So going forward, this Saturday, residents are invited to the lake to a magical journey on the Great Lawn, and this time we're showing the Disney movie, A Wrinkle in Time, and that's at 6 p.m. Saturday. Then on Saturday, December 1st, it's time to get into the holiday spirit for the Frozen Fest, Holiday Fest. Residents are invited to Town Hall from 11 to 3 as they are whisked to a frozen winter wonderland. There will be unique treats, crafts, and plenty of holiday-themed interactive experiences and a chance to visit with Santa Claus. The holiday fun doesn't stop there, as residents can join us at 6 p.m. on the Great Lawn once again for the showing of Santa Claus, the Santa Claus movie. Ensuring that the community is in proper mindset for the holidays, CROA presents Stars and Promises Tour starring Peter Mayer on Wednesday, December 5th, beginning at 7 p.m. on the Great Lawn. The concert is free to all of the residents and their guests, and a limited number of general seating will be available for residents to bring along their own chairs or blankets and enjoy the evening. There's just a few tabletop reserve tables still available. And so just remember, it's a live recording of this concert, and it will be available for purchase at the end of the concert that evening, and it will make a great holiday gift, especially for those who may bring guests and want to treat them to something as they leave. And then 'tis the season of gift giving. There is no better gift than the gift of life. One Blood will be at Town Hall on December 10th from 9:30 to 2:30, and will once again join us at the Food Truck Friday at Lakeside Park on December 14th. And then, after we get all done with that, we start back in January and start on the father-daughter dance in February. So that's pretty much sums it up. Lots of fun.
The only thing I heard about, that concert, that was great down there. I mean, we had a lot of fun. It was packed. The only comment I heard was from the parents who had kids. At what was that, bungee thing, and there were some other, the slides, they had all the other stuff down there, but apparently there a lot of people waited, a lot of the kids waited in line with their parents, but right at, I think it was 8 o'clock, they shut it down, even if you were in line, I think, which a lot of people didn't know.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
And so the kids were all waiting in line for how long it takes to get up there, and then at 8 o'clock, they shut it down, and everybody that was in line, they need to know that, if you're not on by 8, you're not going to get on.
Right.
So
when we have 2-hour waits for face painting, we've had the same issue, and you cannot turn them away, so we end up putting a stop. So we will do that.
yeah,
That makes a lot of sense.
they stopped the bungee thing and the whatever else was going on. I don't know if it's an insurance thing or just a contract thing or whatever.
And the PTA ran those routes, so we will have to communicate with them, right?
They only ran,
They
as
did
I
the little
understand, they
tents.
only ran the tents.
It was
We
like-
did everything
okay.
else, so
Yeah.
we just need to communicate that better.
Yeah.
Contractually,
It's a
it
good
ended
point.
at 8.
That's a good point. And I'll make sure for, the Winter Fest, because we're going to have a few of those too, so I'll just pass that along.
Yeah.
And Zora, you mentioned, to give the PTA credit,
Yes.
they had somebody set up that
I forgot to
pulled
mention
out on
that,
them
yes.
last minute.
We just found that
So
out, yes.
Those parents for
Yes.
the PTA, they quickly jumped together.
Oh, that's great.
Yep.
So before anybody criticizes.
No, yeah,
that
I
was
didn't mean
somebody
my
that
comment to be critical.
Very last minute, jumped together, and I think they did a great
We
job.
just learned that. You're right, Kevin. Thanks for bringing that up. Yes, they did, and the parents jumped in, and nobody really knew, but anything else?
I have something looking ahead. And this was triggered by the event that Gloria helped organize, Celebration 25. There were several of us were there, and there was something there that when I watched the parade on Saturday, and I saw the high school trailer go behind the banned.
Right.
It reminded me of something that I saw at the Celebration 25 that this town had before, which was a trailer, which could come with chairs and tables and whatever. Whatever the history was, so what I would encourage the committee to look at is that something worth resurrecting? I do know that the trailer still exists and the tires are not rotten. That's all I know.
It's a brand new trailer.
Well, I'll give you a little heads up.
So you can take a look at that.
We'll give you just a little bit of heads up on that. And it used to be on the facilities use agreement that you could rent it as
like a pavilion, like you rent a pavilion.
Right, and if you were having a CROA type event, like in your neighborhood with other residents.
Like the Lights and Lemonade.
You could rent it for $50. If you wanted for a private party, it was about $150. You got a couple tables and chairs with it, and I believe there was a grill.
Okay.
And, but I haven't seen it, so I sort of thought it disappeared. So in the meantime, I did talk to, do you have any information on that you want to share?
We don't have to,
look on right now.
You don't need to answer all this now. I mean, you're welcome to answer it, but.
No, but I think if that's something we want,
Just-
he's going to give us the information.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we take a look at what the resources look like, what it would cost if we need to fix them up
Yeah,
by
take a
noon,
look at it.
and then
And
if
whether we
there's-
want to do it.
And if there's events that we're hosting, what type of staffing or resources that
Just
would
take it,
provide.
all I ask you to do is investigate it.
I'm sorry.
All I would ask you to do is take a look at it, whether it's a good idea to resurrect or not.
Okay.
And decide, maybe we don't want to resurrect it, but just take a look at it.
Yeah, but we will do that, and you're of the mindset too, just so I know that people could rent it as it was before, or it would, okay, just
Blank
look into
slate,
it.
just investigate, do the good work like the dog park does and the special events already does. Just
Well,
take a look at
Yeah,
it.
we do have some information already, so we'll just
Take
go
a look and-
dig a little deeper.
And
into
it may be a non-starter. I was just impressed by some of the things I think Kevin and I talked about.
We'll talk in January.
What was,
We'll put it on next year.
yeah, we talked about what was this carnival thing that happened in the, so just some of the good things that
I
we've
almost
done.
gave JR a heart attack the other day with that.
Okay, we'll have it for you in January.
Yeah, or February, just whatever. Thank you, please.
Thank you, Dory.
Thank you,
I just wanna
Dory.
know if-
Thank you for everything.
If Steve has any update on the now snowing, we've had some meetings on that. Is there anything that people need to know?
Sure, I can give you an update on some of the location of the amenities that are going to be taking place this year for Now Snowing. Just let me preface by saying Now Snowing is not a CROA event. It's not held by the Special Events Committee or CROA. It is a downtown Town Center Foundation Lexington event. And this year, the tree is already set up. It's in the middle of Market Street. And it is going to have snow falling onto the tree nightly. So it'll be lit the Saturday after Thanksgiving. There will be no Santa house this year on the promenade, but they are using the open storefront. That's the old, and I forget the name.
Enchanted?
I think it's the old Enchanted. It's right on Market Street. So Santa will be downtown with Mrs. Claus taking pictures in that old Enchanted storefront there. And then the ice skating rink, the horse carriage, and the train are all still scheduled this year. There will be some different through traffic only road closures taking place for the busiest times, which is the lighting of the tree, and then primarily on the weekends. And that will be Campus Front and Bloom Street. It will only be open to residents that live down there and employees that are working down there, including the parking lot, so that we can hold on to more parking for the residents there. The K-8 school is going to have folks, volunteers out with signs saying parking this way, and then they're going to charge a minimal fee for parking in the K-8 parking lot, and that's a fundraising opportunity for the school. So those are the changes this year.
I will say, and I will give credit due where credit is deserved. I was there down there today when they were testing. JR, I actually ran into him. So they did a testing at 3 o'clock. It looks nice, and I will again give credit. They have a scent in the snow this year.
They have a what?
A scent, so it actually smells like
Pine.
pine.
Oh, a pine scent.
It's
And it
different,
smells
I
on
know.
the tree.
Everybody knows I'm not Lexington's biggest fan, but I will give credit due.
And
where it's
as
deserved.
was discussed yesterday at the CROA meeting, Lexington has used the safety plan that was developed, has coordinated with the sheriff department and other stuff like that to try to do things. So, I mean, we'll see how effective it is, but it was not ignored. I think that needs to be said. It was discussed yesterday.
Was there an increase in security?
I don't know that.
He has
that was
worked
part of
with
the
the sheriff's
safety
department to
There's a
talk about
portion
the
of the
security,
plan, there's a
Mike,
portion of the plan recommended.
would prefer not to openly talk in public about how many sheriffs and where they're gonna be, those types of things, which makes sense. We don't wanna point
Did they
that out
address what were the
to any
concerns?
wrongdoers. Yes, they have.
I can, I was in law enforcement for 32 years, and the reason you don't release all your security plans is because when you release it, everybody gets it, and people that shouldn't have it get it.
Right.
So actually, under public records law, a law enforcement agency can refuse to release their security plans. Like, I worked on the Super Bowl committee safety. All that stuff was protected from release to the general public, so that's why you don't release it. It's not because we just don't want you to have it. It's because it's a safety concern, because it gets in the wrong hands, then people can plan around it. So that's the reason behind that.
And so, Steve, they're just going to do the road changes for the weekends and the heavy events? It's not going to be the
It
straight?
won't be throughout the week. It'll only be for the busier events.
That's great. Thank you.
And again, residents can get through there and park, residents that live there in the condo association. We ask residents that live in town to not park there. Please find alternate parking locations. Walk, ride your bike, whatever you can, but that is going to be held for condo residents and employees in the downtown shops and restaurants.
Will some of what you're describing be in an article in the Celebration News in December? I mean,
I know that.
Yeah, in December, or is that's already gone to print?
Mike has sent
Okay.
a memo to the residents that live
Okay.
there, or has communicated with the managers or board president to get, because I just read it this
That came through
afternoon.
today.
Okay, good.
Okay.
And I know Kanoa asked him to do that, and he did that today.
So finishing up committee reports, anything for Artisan Park?
Artisan passed their budget. They also are moving forward with their elections for the Artisan Park Committee. Those are taking place right now. They'll conclude at the early part of December, and then a new committee will take place there. I think that's all that's going on there.
Okay.
In the minutes, it said that Evergreen and the Finance Subcommittee were in the process of restating their financials due to the determination that certain values with employee compensation needed to be changed.
Yeah,
Are you aware of that, or?
I think what's going on is that the individuals who are the general manager and others now work for Evergreen rather than for CCMC. So in the process of transitioning and trying to figure out where they fit in the Evergreen pay structure and scale, they were reassessing and evaluating those employees. That may make some difference. It looks like the Artisan Clubhouse and restaurant, if you will, is going to be break even to a profit for the year. So that's a big turnaround from what was historically a $50,000, $60,000 loss. So I think that's what they're working on. I don't have any detail beyond that. I can find out more if you need it.
Okay. Liaison report, anything with CDD? Jack, anything? No, they haven't met since.
No, they haven't met.
No. I think their next meeting is Tuesday.
Tuesdays.
Okay. Financial review? Any?
Nothing,
because we just met a few weeks.
Nothing to discuss.
Right, we moved the meeting up a week, so they're not
Right,
ready yet.
right,
But
right.
they will be soon.
Yeah, the last one was delayed, and this one is early.
Right.
So wait till December. Manager report, Steve?
I'll start with Comcast. Last week, Jackson and I met with the condo owner, or the condo management and board members. I think we had 5 condo associations represented at that meeting. And we talked a little bit about the current state of Comcast in dropping fiber lines into the condo associations. And it's gone back and forth over the past few days. As of today, I spoke with Jackie, the representative from Comcast, and her information that she's relayed to me is that they were in negotiations with Smart City to extend the use of Smart City lines for 60 days. She felt like there was some positive movement towards that, and that she was possibly have an answer today before this meeting. I did not get a response or an answer before the meeting. But they did make it clear that if they can reach this agreement for 60 days, The condo associations are going to have to enter into an agreement with them quickly for them to be able to get the mobilization of the construction teams and get the fiber lines in. They do not have a lot of room for further negotiations with each one of the condo associations. So it will be up to the condo associations to be prepared to enter into those agreements if they can reach this extension for 60 days. If there's anything you'd like to add, Jackson.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. The reality is we've got 13 condo associations in town. We have had participation from 5 or 6 of those in these various meetings. There are a number of condos that simply have chosen not to communicate what they're doing at all. I mean, there are some that literally have said, we're not going to tell you. So we're at a bit of an impasse in terms of trying to find a collaborative solution for all the condos. I don't think we can do that. I think what we heard at the last meeting, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but it sounded like each of the condos that was represented at the meeting has taken their own decision or their own path to what they want to do. Some are ready to sign agreements, some are not. Some are going to cut the cable entirely. Some, well, I mean, some we just don't know. So to bring it back to where we started, one of the things that we talked about was whether or not CROA could assist with some sort of a high-level negotiator by bundling all of the condos together, figuring out if there was some leverage and negotiating power for all of them together. The problem that we ultimately end up with is there is no commonality. And so it's virtually impossible to bundle anything because every single condo is going to have to make their own deal. And because of the timing, I'm finding it very difficult to foresee a scenario in which we could hire a consultant, bring the consultant in, work out a deal for each of the condos that wants to participate, and then I don't know what we do about the condos that don't want to participate or forget to participate or whatever it might be. I think we have a long-term systemic problem with respect to our communication with condominium owners. They represent 38% of the CROA members, but by statute they operate totally independently, and we have very minimal impact in what's going on in their world. And we saw as board members this week another example of a condominium that's having construction problems. And these kinds of things aren't going to go away. I don't think we're going to see less of them in the future than we've got today. So towards that end, one of the things we're trying to do is to meet regularly with condos as a quarterly basis to invite them to do that. I've requested of Steve and Susan that they task someone on their staff to literally get in a NEV and go to every condo in Celebration, every association, and knock on the door and say, tell us who we should communicate with. And here's where I go off on my quiet rant and rave. I am tired of condos like Artisan Park Club telling us that they won't communicate and that we don't have a person to communicate with and that they don't want to talk to us. They are fully entitled under the law to do what they do, but they are not entitled to disassociate themselves from the overlying CROA, and we've got to have that information. They're the most egregious in my mind, but they're not the only ones. So I'm hopeful that we will begin to get some information, start some communication, and find a way that we can work as neighbors and not as enemies. And Comcast, God love them, because I don't.
That's how you really feel.
That's it? Part B. I would like to add, too, that I did talk to Marty Rubin at Smart City and asked him if there were any solutions in case this doesn't work out and Comcast cannot provide cable services. And he told me that he would be working with his team to see if they can identify something. So we've tried to see if there are any other alternatives if the Comcast doesn't work out for the condo associations.
I mean, I think the issue is, and I know we all try to communicate and do everything we can because the condo owners are homeowners like everyone else, but the sad thing is we can't force the condos to communicate. We can't force them.
We can't force, but I think what this board is attempting to do is to get that networking, offer the invitation to the table, and just keep trying.
I would like to pose the question differently. If the condos ignores entirely, do a piss poor job of engineering, reviewing their own stuff, and it destroys the value of condos, it destroys the values of homes in the town. I think we need, we have been nice for quite a while now. Maybe we need to really take a workshop and talk about a less nice approach to how we deal with the fiduciary responsibility about thinking everybody in the town versus 38% who may or may not care, but, you know, if they're owned, we need to discuss this differently.
Yeah, and so far, the outreach has been to management/board and not to residents per se. Is that?
Although we had a lot of residents actually show up who, from some of these condos, who said, we don't know what our own condo is doing, because they won't communicate with us either. But I think Brian is right. We need a fundamental rethinking of this process. I know we've set it for our next workshop.
We have it on Monday workshop.
And I would invite.
To start it.
I'll just say, if you're a condo person, if you're a board member, if you think I'm a jerk, come to the workshop and let's talk about it. Let's at least find out why it is that you think we're so bad, so that we can at least start to get at some of this stuff.
Yeah, and what I would say about Monday's workshop, and this is to Brian's point, Monday's workshop is designed to start the discussion, not to fully vet it.
Absolutely.
It's to start the discussion and try to identify what some of the issues and constraints and opportunities might be.
I'd like to ask the board if we can hold off on any action of going around to the condos until your conversation on Monday, and then get some clear direction from the board on it.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You were in the management.
Yes, sir.
I don't think you were done.
No, I just have a couple things. The interlocal agreement from the county for reimbursement for this project that you see up on the screen here, in the amount of approximately $2.1 million. We received that last week. The CROA board has it. They've added some comments. It's with our attorney right now, reviewing it for comments. And the communication is open with the county to have our follow-up meeting with them once we hear back from the attorney. So tomorrow will be me reaching out to the attorney again to see where he is with this, so that I can schedule that follow-up meeting with Beth Ann Knight with the county.
And we also do have a discussion on that, anything beyond what we've already done by email.
Yep.
And then also discussing how we're going to talk about this with the community and when, in terms of the details. So it's about a 10-page draft agreement at this point.
Because the usage has changed a little bit.
So we're going to, and so that is on the workshop also for Monday.
So we had a meeting with the construction team this morning, and we actually walked the site. This picture is 10 days old. They're doing these at the beginning of the month, but I can show you what's been updated as of today. When you come down here, this synthetic turf field, which is kind of framed out like this here, is completely formed and ready to go for the synthetic turf company to start their work that they need to do. This was scheduled to take place around January. They're actually going to be bringing the curb in on Friday of this week. I'm sorry, Friday after Thanksgiving.
Bring the what in?
The curbing that goes around the outside here. So they'll begin the curbing of this. And then after Thanksgiving, and the curb goes in, then they'll begin bringing in the materials to do the synthetic turf. So the synthetic turf field is going to be one of the first items that's completed on this project. All the stormwater drains and inlets have been placed underground. There may be a few that are still remaining out here, but there's a majority of that have been placed. And then you can see the wall down here, the barrier wall has been constructed and in place. We're looking at a time frame probably to get the rest of this stuff done through the end of the year, and then in January they'll begin the natural turf fields. The permitting is all in for the building through the county, so that's been approved, and Danny Bumpus, as our architect of the building, met with TCC today to finalize the last few details for the building. So you'll see construction of the building beginning soon also.
So that's been approved by the county?
And the permitting has been approved by the county.
Thank you.
We're just finalizing some of the details with TCC.
Okay.
So the project's moving along nicely, and it's on schedule at this point in time. And the synthetic turf field's actually ahead of schedule at this point in time. So I don't know if Jack and Kevin want to add anything to that?
That was a great meeting today.
It was a good meeting. You know, I go through days where I love the TCC and I hate TCC. Today's a love day. They're pretty good. Watching the whole thing and watching them really get into the details as if they were building this day one.
They certainly are looking out for our best interests as a community with
Who's
this
there
project.
from TCC?
Ken Decor. He's their ARC representative.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
Anything else, management?
Todd's here and Yellowstone's here. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add or if there's any questions for Yellowstone.
I'll be real quick because you have a lot on your agenda for tonight. But as you may have noticed during all the weekend events that Yellowstone has gotten the parks looking very nice. All the ryegrass that we talked about at the last meeting is growing, rooting in. That's why the Founders Park and the Great Lawn look so great. So I'm very happy with that. The sports fields here at K8, those will be seeded the 11th, was it? November? First week of December. So holding off because of the activities that of the leagues that are on there now. Other than that, they're winding down with their weekly mowing, going into the every other week, except for the Bermuda fields, which is still once a week. And they're getting more into the detail of all the little bits and pieces that they may have overlooked during the summertime. Those things are getting addressed and cleaned up. So, other than that, I'm very happy with the direction that we're going.
Yeah, Founders Park looked really nice for this veteran ceremony. It looked really nice.
It really did.
It was picturesque with the two sheriff's
good job.
horses standing there and the new landscaping grazing on the grass, but it's okay, it'll grow back.
I think this is part of the newspaper magazine dispensers. It's time to upgrade those now that we've upgraded the deliverable. What are you doing about that?
I believe JR is already.
JR is already working on that, yes. He's working some issues out to get those addressed, but yeah, I would agree with you. It's time to get them updated because the magazines, when we delivered them, kind of slide around in there, so it's time to update. So JR is working on it. Any other questions for me?
Anything else? Todd?
That's the end of our management report.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Yellowstone. Any questions, further questions for Steve before we move on to action items?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Action items? So action item 4 is our first action item.
Do you want to make the motion and then second and then?
Yeah, let's get it alive.
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, Vaughn's making a motion to approve.
Second.
And Jack second.
So we have with us here tonight Whit Alexander from Los Design, and he's going to talk a little bit about this Gantt chart that you see up here and our timeline for completing this facilities master plan. So I'll let Whit talk, and then Brian might have some things he wants to add also.
We met today at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, so Whit came in early, and we met at 4 o'clock to talk a little bit about the plan and how we're going to start approaching this. And Whit's going to take about 5 minutes to kind of go over that real quick with you, and then any questions that you have, and then we're just going to hit the run
Right.
and start running with it.
The backdrop is that there was a prior discussion. There were 4 proposals looked at. We did have a workshop on this, and this was the recommendation of those who went in depth.
Correct, yes.
So that's the background. That's where we are.
All right, very good. Thank you, guys, ladies, gentlemen. Yeah, a little bit about the process we talked about today at 4. After this meeting, within the next week or so, I'll be in touch with Steve and the rest of staff, and we'll start gathering all the results from the previous planning efforts that he undertook, I guess, recently in the past year or two, for the recreation plan, which is more the programming side of things that you guys did. This plan building on top of that plan. This plan that we're going to do is the facilities master plan, which now that you've undertaken, or as you just announced, the athletic complex is underway, all right, what's next? What do the residents want next in terms of the next build-out staging of capital plans over the next few years? And that's the intent of the master plan. We're going to gather a lot of public input, we're going to start trying to schedule probably after the first of the year, get through the holiday season, do a town hall meeting, style meeting, where it's open to everyone to come and completely, just freestyle, tell us what they want. No preconceived notions about what residents might want. Go through that process, then sit down more specifically with some interest groups, special focus groups like athletics, seniors. We'll give each one of those types of groups an audience, more of a direct one-on-one 1-hour meeting where we'll really dig into the details with each one of those groups, listen to what they have to say, and all of that being done The first public meeting, the focus group meetings, to get ready for a public survey that will go out wider to more people in the community. Those first few meetings will actually help shape the survey question. We will take the input that people give us, and if someone keeps telling us the same thing over and over in the public meetings, we want to find out if that's important to everyone, or is that more specific to one group, that kind of thing. So that's what we'll be doing in January. Those first rounds of public meetings to try to do the survey, give or take February, sort of in that time frame. And then towards the end of February, have the survey results back and analyzed and we'll be going through the drafts of that with Steve and staff and showing them, what we heard in the surveys, what we heard in the public meetings, and then from there launch into the facility master plan, building on top of that input. So pretty much, and hopefully that would be about another two-month process with the capital plan, facility plan, once we are through the survey and the public input process.
And then the only other thing I want to add to that is that there will be two sets of surveying going on simultaneously. One will be the general public. Everybody can respond through Friday Flash. It'll be on our website. We want to get as much of a turnout as possible because we have around 12,000 residents or people that live in Celebration. But then we have, which we thought was very important as part of this project, a statistically valid survey. And that survey will be worked through a third-party vendor, and it will be a completely random selection of a sample size of the community. And those folks will get a postcard in the mail with a special code to answer. So we will have two different sets of data coming back for the board to look at as prioritization when we get to that second stage of this developing the overall master plan. So we want to encourage public input and homeowner input in as many ways as possible, whether that be through the focus meeting, through the online open survey, and then if you get the postcard and you're randomly selected, fill it out. Take the time to do that because it is a sample size. I don't have the PhD in statistics or how that works, but they hire a company that does, and they know how to do it. So I'll have no input or say. None of the board members will have any input or say of who receives that statistically valid survey.
We won't see that, and the company that does that won't know who these people are that they're sending to. They do these surveys across the country every day, so to them it's just another survey, and they're just randomly selecting households to send that to, with the intent of that being more this, like Steve said, the statistically valid part, like a Gallup poll, and there will be one set of data that will be the randomly sampled, selected, statistically valid data. And then we can compare that to the general input that everybody else gives us, that everyone else goes online and looks at. And we can look for trends, consistencies, maybe differences in that, and that may help drive some of the decisions the board makes for the capital plan.
And in the Parks and Recreation world, whether it's a municipality or a homeowner association, I know Hunters Creek just went through this process also. This is how you determine the needs of the community and how you prioritize the expenditure of your capital dollars that you're bringing in. It's a difficult decision for you all to make. Just hearing from people that can make a board meeting here and there or send an email here and there. This is a proven process to be able to really get an understanding of what the needs of the community are for building your new facilities or enhancing your existing facilities.
If I may, one big thing, and in your meetings, perhaps share information about the upcoming election and different medias that we send out for that. My biggest thing, and I think everybody's biggest thing, is to make sure we have involvement from the entire community, and that's the awareness that this is happening. And I think that might help you to make sure if the community and everybody in the community knows it's happening, it should make your job a little easier.
And we actually went through that quite
So perfect.
today.
Thank you.
We talk about, so I'm going to do this broadly, but kickoff meeting here really is Steve, staff, them. The first public meeting is not just to hear what everybody wants, but it's also to educate people. And it's going to be here. We know we'll get 100 people, give or take a little. But that starts to form the base of it. We wanted to get an article in the January paper. We're going to do Friday flashes. We're going to do the email blast, seller service. We can do a lot of stuff here. Site reviews are getting ready. Then you got the two. we were thinking this would be the week of January 7th, because his first cycle runs out here about 8, Steve's actually cut it off a little here, but it runs out here about 10 weeks, which would get you to March 15th, so that the survey is done. We've got the results right after the new board members are sworn in, and if I can bounce you back over here a little.
I just want to make sure everyone can see it, so it's big enough to see.
Okay.
Oh, shut up.
I'm just,
the 2 days, so you do the public meeting, you have the focus groups here. In the focus groups, we were talking about meeting with the recreational group. We were talking about meeting with the Foundation Tiny and the Thriving and Lifelong. We were talking about, a couple of things with the board. We were talking about getting the soccer groups, some of the kids, getting the right focus groups so you get a diversity there, because you get focus input, but then you also fine, tell all the soccer people to tell all their people to vote. The name is really going to be Parks and Facilities Plans. We've heard about Pickleball Parks. We've heard today about tennis courts. Do we need more tennis courts? And really, we're coming out of this, if we get to 2.1 million from the county, in good shape financially with growing things here. So we've got that ability. So, you go through this. So this survey period out here, really week 5, if we start January 7th, it's going to be going on in February while we're going on with the same election stuff and everything like that. We talked about using Steve's communication, because it's going to be an online survey. So Steve can almost take his letter and say, hey, vote for your candidates and go here and go to this link. The people who get the postcard are part of the other part, but we want to get as much feedback from as many people as we can. So, that kind of works there. And then after we get through the survey process and got that feedback, you've got about another 6 or 7 weeks here, because you get a couple of weeks for the board to really mull it over, ask questions, think about tailoring it. They start giving the feedback on what would these things cost and stuff like that, so that you're really probably out here at about May 1st when you got a completed project. The survey questions will actually be developed out here with input with them, working with Steve, and the board will be able to have some input into the survey questions and understanding them too, because we have talked about, it's not enough to say what a community center, what is a community center, and other things like that. So we talked about that.
Can I add to Kevin's comment? I think that January, in the turn of the new year, is such an important time for us here in this community, almost a rock the vote type campaign, because it's your opportunity to speak now for what your future park facilities look like. It's an opportunity to vote for your future leaders on the CROA board. And this CROA board has already established working towards a process of long-term strategic thinking, not just for that year, but what does the future of Celebration look like? This is an important time to get out. If you don't do anything else when it comes to CROA throughout the rest of the year, if you're too busy for that, pay attention in January and February, because that's when your voice is going to be heard, and you have more impact on the local level here in Celebration than you ever will voting for who's going to be the next president in 2020.
Yeah, I do want to just exercise one note of caution here. We've already experienced as a board what happens when we put out a survey and people think it's an election. It's the community telling us, vote this way or this way. I want to be really clear that while we want participation and we want input and we want a lot of things, this is not a vote and the highest vote total gets that item automatically. And I trust that this is not your first rodeo and you've done this enough to know how to phrase that and set it up. But I want us to be really careful about the difference between participation and an election to choose what we're going to do. Because truthfully, there could be a very loud minority that's asking for something that is just not feasible. And even if that group of people really, really want it, if it's a $10 million item, it's not going to happen, and I think we should be careful about that.
Well, and to piggyback on that, I think that the important part of this is the final part. After the survey data, all that comes back in. The CROA board is the ultimate stakeholder here when it comes to deciding how these dollars are spent. There's going to be a lot of variables that are involved in this. If it's a community center that's a $6 million community center, you're not going to have enough to just do that next year. So decisions are going to be made. Do we save money and put all the other projects on hold? And so when you get these different pools of data come up, you might have to wait some of it to decide what's more important than others.
That's what we do in our capital plan. There'll be a first draft of a capital plan that we'll put together that will have most of the things that were prioritized in the surveys and the public input listed with price tags to all of that. And we won't identify whether that's year 1 through 2 or year 3 through 5, or year 6 through 10, or future, or unknown future. And then working with the board on the overall capital improvement calendar, we'll start moving projects out, further out, because it requires some saving, or maybe longer thought, or maybe even more, you may have to pool other resources, things like that. And then some low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit touches 75% of the responses we received in the survey. It's something you can easily do in your current budgeting now. Yes, let's move that into the year 0 through 2 on the capital plan.
Wynn has not seen any of the financial work we did as part of the budget yet, so he doesn't know that we've done some of this, so.
Well, and this is a plan, ultimately. This is a plan to keep us focused as we move into the future on prioritization of projects. If anyone remembers the old Seinfeld episode, anyone can take the reservation. So the plan's important. We have to stick to the plan, and it should help keep us focused as we move forward.
Yeah, I just want to control expectations. I really don't want to be sitting here in June having people say, well, we voted for this thing, why didn't you do it? Ultimately, correct me if I'm wrong, but ultimately the point of all of this is to have a rational, reasonable, long-term plan that reflects the interests and the needs of the community and weighs them against the realities of what we've got. It is not a straight-up election, and whoever gets the most votes gets that item.
We
can reemphasize that when we do the public meeting and the focus group, and even in the drafting of the survey language.
But Jackson, what I often see, and what I've seen in my entire career, is the opposite of that, where people will say, well, I didn't get a chance to show up, I didn't get a chance to say something. And this is important to understand, if you do not come and speak about this, now this is your opportunity to have your voice heard on what you want. But you're right, just because you vote on it doesn't mean that that's the item that's going to be done in the prioritization timeline that you want it done in.
But it also sounds like there's a final report that then the board decides how they want to adopt it or adapt it.
And approve it, ultimately.
And approve it or not approve, or approve it with modifications.
Ultimately, the board has to approve something.
Right, exactly.
But it's the board's decision, and ultimately, which item you go first on is going to become a board decision.
And it doesn't tie your hands.
About this board. And I'm enthusiastic about it. There's no part of this that I think is bad, but I also know, after 20 years in celebration, that when you say to people, you get to choose, some people think you get to choose means they get to make the ultimate decision, and that's not accurate here.
And I think it's important too, I don't know with the information going out, to go over at least for some of the past history, maybe the past 5 years, what we have spent the capital improvement funds on so far.
Yeah.
So they don't feel like, well, we haven't done anything for XYZ. Just
Right.
give some of that information, because I don't think most people are aware of our expenditures and where they've gone. So I don't know if that's something we can include. You guys feel that's important?
Perhaps at town hall.
Yeah, at the very beginning meeting, we did this thing we were talking about earlier today. We call it a vocabulary exercise at first before we even start asking for input. We can talk about the history like you're talking about, and then we get into things in our vocabulary exercise. What is a community center? Some people think that's just a gym. Some people think that's meeting rooms, and some people think it's a catering kitchen for a free lunch, and who knows, aquatics and what else. So we go through and say, this is what we refer to a community center. This is what we refer to a neighborhood park, or da-da-da-da-da. So we go through and do that type of educational outreach, and what you're suggesting there is definitely needs to be part of that. So.
Could you explain how you're going to distinguish between, with the two survey methods, email and a card mailing?
The card mailing gives you a code.
How are you going to distinguish between an owner versus a renter?
There will be a survey question like that. When you are sent a card, you'll have a burner. It's basically like a burner code. You can only take it. You can only enter it once and take the survey once, and that only gets registered one time in the statistical sampling. Now, if you enter your data and fill out your survey online, and then hey, you want to go do it again, because you can do it again and again and again, but it won't be counted in that statistical sampling.
How will you? If you do an email, it's going to go to the owner probably that owns the property, the actual owner, and then the card gets mailed, it may go to the renter, so you're going to have two responses from the same address? Is that how that's going to, is that what's going to happen?
You may not know the setup, but many of whether it's an apartment or a state home, whatever, it's owned by somebody, but who is inside receiving the card, we don't know if it's the owner or the renter. I think that's what he's trying to distinguish, is how are you going to know?
Well, it's a detail we can work at, but the question would be, are y'all interested in the resident or the property owner's response? Because the resident will receive the card.
I think that if we can talk about the database that will be utilized, the address database of homeowners. And I think that that's important, that the statistically valid survey go to homeowners. I don't think it matters, though, if they vote twice, if they utilize the online open public survey. I think we want to encourage as much response as possible to that open public survey from just people that live here in Celebration. And then I think your statistically valid survey, you're going to weight it a little bit higher because it is a true sampling, and we push very hard to make sure that that's included in the scope of this work. That needs to be weighted and considered as homeowners, that we have a real sampling of the community of what they're looking for.
Could that be two separate statistical categories, renters versus owners? Or would that be something?
The way it'll work is, there'll be a question, they'll say, do you rent or own? And so when we start slicing, dicing the data, what we get is a big spreadsheet filled with responses of pools and parks and trails, and families with no kids at home, and families with kids at home, an age group of this, an age group of that, and rent or own. And so we can, if y'all ask us, they say, how many people who own a home, who have kids at home, want a pool, let's say, whatever it is. We can quickly analyze that and tell you what percentage said that.
I know certainly
so we can compare.
What is happening here is you're capturing data.
Yes.
I mean, at the end of the day, if somebody votes 200 times, I'm hoping the system, if they fill in the same name and the address 200 times, I'm hoping we got 199 of them and say, okay, that's not credible. We have to we make those decisions. But that becomes why we said the survey results are published, and then you look at it and you give feedback to them and say, this totally looks skewed.
We've seen that where the statistical number for, let's say, give me a facility, a big slide, let's say, whatever it is 25% of the responses say, yes, I would like a big slide, or whatever that is. But yet, in the completely open to the public one, it says 99% of the responses says, I want a big slide.
You're going to see that again.
Then we're going to see that as a trend, and we're going to say something's up, and we can actually, I believe we can check and see IP address and see how many times that was entered on an IP address. So and we won't let that skew our decision making.
So some of what we're getting into is a lot of the details of the scope. So this is a kind of general scope of work, Section 4?
Right, correct.
And there's some pieces in here that I think are irrelevant, like getting the county involved. I mean, you talk about local county data. That's not relevant, I don't think, for us here.
It is. Well, what we would do, it helps us in our capital prioritization. Because what if a lot of people are asking for some sort of facility, but yet the county is about to do the exact same thing, right down the road? Then that might help you guys decide whether you prioritize it now or push it out in the future.
It's just more data.
Yeah.
More data.
But a lot of the details here can be fleshed out in more detail.
That's right.
I mean, we can talk further.
That's right.
Yeah. The methodological issue that I've seen is, and what I've often done with research is, you gather the data, you start with focus groups, you're gathering some quantitative data, and then you go back to focus groups. So you have some further discussion and to try to interpret the data. Why do you think that people with children are so much different than those not, or how to interpret some of that? So that's the methodological thing that I can talk further about.
Can we call the question?
Yeah, we're ready. I have about a dozen other comments, which I will not do.
Okay.
Well, the first item, the kickoff meeting, I think should be Brian as being part of this process, be the board liaison, and then anything that you want Brian to bring to that meeting, we need to just collect those three.
And I think I think that's what you cited, and this goes to Kevin's point about community involvement. Community is individuals, but it's also intact groups. Celebration Foundation, the CDD, those are intact group, and others. But I think both of those are important, not just the individuals. Individuals are vital, the groups also are vital.
Yeah,
the intact groups.
Focus groups, absolutely.
And you cited those. You listed maybe half dozen.
Yeah. And we have them in our recreation program plan. We have all of our groups captured, and we can group them into like groups and have them participate in the different meetings. But everybody will have an opportunity to have their voice heard.
For the next 2 months, over the next couple of recreation committees, could you share that with those committee agendas and just have that communication shared there as well?
Well, I think the Recreation Committee has a special part to play in this, and not overseeing the overall project, though. I think that they're more of helping us with the focus group type.
Yes, no, I mean, all the committees, so right down to dog park or special events or whatever the case is, so they could share it with those people, and they could share it with others that this is coming. So
Yeah, dog
be
park
on the
committee,
lookout for a survey.
Special Events Committee may,
Just as part of the communication, okay.
a Special Events Committee may have some part of the facilities master plan.
Just saying for access to
They need a
all
space for X or Y.
Well, they should be part of the voice that's heard, absolutely.
One of the intact groups.
Correct, yes.
We've had the question called. Any further discussion? Okay, so the motion is to approve the facility master plan update with Lowe's Design, Lowe's Design, in the amount of $32,000. This comes from the CROA capital improvement expenditure. We had a motion already from.
Vaughn and Jackson.
Was it?
Long time ago, seconded.
Jack.
Okay, so we have that.
Secondly called the question.
Are we ready to call? Are we ready to vote?
I had one last question, I'm sorry. I remember on your brochure, there were a lot of additional expenses. Do you normally stay within this, or how often do you go outside of that frame?
I had an hourly rate sheet in there.
Fairly high hourly, yeah.
And that was extra requests that may come in like different, like say for instance, we have a scope that we priced basically, right? We have so many meetings we priced. If the board team says, we want to do another round of public meetings, then we would base it on those hourly rates.
Okay, I guess I just let the board know prior to going over.
Well, I won't
That's right.
I won't have the authorization.
It would have to be authorized.
Yeah, it'd have to be a request. It would not be something it was a surprise bill.
No,
It would-
no,
yes,
no.
right.
The 32,000 right now
It's
includes
a
the
lot.
meetings that are laid out here, it includes the travel and everything
That's
like
correct.
that. So
That's right.
the 32,000 right now is an all-in number, unless you come back to the board.
That's right.
Okay, ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Good. All right, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So now we move to item number 1, and we have a revised wording of the motion.
Right. Steve is stepping up for 1 second because Lowe's is
Right,
leaving.
right. So, you want me to read the motion? You want to
Sure,
read?
go ahead.
Okay. The updated motion is to approve the proposed CJC insurance renewal for the 2018-2019 policy year through Siley, S-I-H-L-E, Insurance, in an amount up to $161,000. The coverage may include additional coverages of cyber and environmental liability. This is a CJC operating expenditure. Final coverage terms and pricing will be determined before the coverage effective date of December 7, 2018, when Siley has final quotes from the insurance carriers. So do we have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you from Brian, and Vaughn was second. And Rachel, do you need the wording? Thank you. Discussion.
For the public, we have done a pretty thorough review of the insurance program. We talked about it yesterday with CJC and Kanoa, or during the Kanoa meeting too, and what's actually covered and what wasn't covered in the past. Do we think it was adequate? We're going to increase cost because personally I just believe there were gaps. And we've been discussing those as a board, as a group. We are getting more quotes in a couple areas. Our effective date is December 7th for the renewal of our policy. We'll probably are a few days away from being able to make a decision. But I think we're ended up in a pretty decent place.
Are you comfortable with the coverages now?
Yes.
Brian, what was the budget amount for this? Do you remember?
The budgeted amount would have been pretty close to probably 147, 148. So we're gonna, it was pretty much in line with last year, maybe.
It was plus 8%.
Plus 8%.
So it's 142 plus 8%.
So about 150.
And
We're gonna be about
and in
160.
the background documentation, each of the, I think, 10 items showed the comparison with prior year,
Certainly.
which was very helpful.
And are we including the cyber?
I think aside for $900, we should include cyber protection. I think wouldn't be wise not to.
And the environmental.
And the environmental
We don't have a
liability.
quote there, and I'm not sure it's critical that we have to deal with that right now, as opposed to some of the other things.
Any further discussion on this?
Is this an annual insurance? Does it get reviewed every year at this time of the year?
Yeah, around the effective date, December 7th, which ties it in right ahead of the budget cycle and stuff like that.
When will we address the environmental?
We can address it whenever we want.
We didn't include it because we didn't get a quote?
We don't have a quote right now, but we could continue to seek one, if you'd like.
And are you comfortable with the insurance broker that's negotiating this?
Yeah, in my dealings with him, he seems confident, the agency seems confident, he's been around a long time, he's been doing it for 40-some years.
Okay. And I guess my last question is, my understanding is that in prior years, the board made a lot of decisions about coverages to increase or decrease or cut back based on premiums. When we looked at this as a board, we saw some things, some gaps. Is our insurance broker now of a mind to understand our particular interests at this stage and what we're trying to accomplish here in your view?
He's crystal clear.
I want to know.
Well, and I was going to make a comment. I've known our agent for quite a few years, and you set the bar. So this is the opportunity with Brian with the background insurance to set the bar where we are. And in future years, it'll be based on the decisions that are made this year. He's not going to say all of a sudden, oh, we don't need this, we need less, or 10 times more. And then next year's board will make the decision on level of coverage.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is that we not whipsaw here any more than we do anywhere else, that there's a consistency over time, and that we create a standard of what kind of coverages we want. I'm concerned that in past years, there were individual board members who fancied themselves to be more expert than others about insurance, certainly not as expert as Brian, who decided that we didn't need certain things. And I would like to know that this insurance broker understands clearly and unequivocally that we want to be protected and that the community deserves it. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm of the opinion, like on the one item that I know you're talking about, he briefed the individuals last year and they didn't care.
Okay.
They chose for whatever reason not to.
That, and you all, through executive session, had heard legal opinion on this matter.
Right. Okay.
I have one other thing to say, and Brian, cut me off if you need to. For future boards and future board members, can we include information about this up front, so that way it's not a surprise?
I think it would be wise to include this in the board briefing, so people understand what we got and why we got it.
Not when it comes up.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
Because we're not going to have, you may not, the boards change every year, and I think it's important to have the
It'd be good to have it laid out as something that becomes repetitive with new boards, members, new boards, so they remember, aha, this is why we do what we do.
I just have a question on the motion. It says it includes cyber and environmental liability. We're not including environmental?
That motion was rewritten.
No, but
It says may include.
It says may include. The one that I sent out today.
Why did we wait on that with, the things that go on now with the pools and things? Is there a reason that we're not doing that now?
I don't have a quote now.
On environment.
We can certainly
on the
get a
environmental.
quote.
We don't have a quote yet.
Most of our environmental exposure is pretty low. It could be pool water, viruses or something out of that, which would get you some protection. Fine, we'll follow through. We just don't have the quote yet.
Yeah.
But we can add that like at the next meeting, the next board?
So if it falls within the 161, the proposed dollar amount, then it's okay.
Can we add that as an addition at a later meeting?
We can certainly add that at a later meeting if we want to, and we'll get the quote and see what it costs. It may fit easily within the 160, because I would do the 1 million versus the 2 million limits with the 10 million umbrella on top anyway. I think that's more than adequate cover. I said that in email today too.
Yeah.
So
if we can price it, if it fits in the price, it's done.
I have one more, and it might be a little sensitive. Liquor legal liability, and it says for the artisan service area. Does that additional amount get put into artisan's budget?
Gets billed to artisan.
Yes, in the past, it's been billed to artisan.
And it still will be.
And in the future, too.
Yes. In the future, yes.
More importantly, any further discussion on this? This is important discussion. Any further discussion?
Thank you.
Brian, do you feel with this amount that it's important to look at any other quotes in the future, next year, 2 years down the road, 3 years
Which
down
one,
the road?
sorry?
Not for this year, but for next year or the following year when they do quote this, do you want a second agent looking at it?
The broker did, didn't he? I mean, he looked at different.
He looked at other companies.
I thought because we started off before Steve, I don't know if Susan was in there or not, I mean, I spent 20 minutes with him going over property carriers and stuff like that, and he was very confident, he understood. So, I mean, I did not come away feeling for 1 second that he is not competent, and I think we've got
No,
a
he's
pretty
extremely
darn.
competent. I just, do we have like a backup down the road in case he makes a change?
Well,
or
he's in a
something?
good-sized agency. I mean, if he got hit by the proverbial milk
Yeah,
truck,
just have a
it's a
second
big enough
person.
agency.
Yeah.
We'd talk to whoever to take his place, but I think we're competently represented.
And I think we'd be prepared to bring you other agents if anything were to happen to that particular
Yeah.
agent.
Oh, no, I'm sure they want the account.
Ready to vote?
I just have one.
Please.
I'm sorry.
No,
I
no.
don't mean to, but may include additional coverages of cyber and environmental. So if those quotes fall within the 169,100, then we're going to accept that coverage?
161.
Well, 160,900. Or we-
161 is how we wrote it.
If it fits in there under 161, I'm sorry, then we are going to.
It sounds like if it
Add
fits
that,
within,
right? Is that what that means?
it's
I've
within.
I've definitely heard the direction of the board tonight. We'll get the environmental quote. I think we're gonna have we gotta figure out the property carrier, what we do there, so we got a conversation there. This includes the incumbent carrier Aspen Specialty, which was higher, assuming that's, but I think we got some other savings, so there's a good chance we can make it all fit within the 161. And I think you've all been pretty clear, you want the environmental.
Yeah, I think that's the message.
We'll make it work.
Well, the cybers also may include as well.
That's 900.
We want to include both. We want to make it work, and if it doesn't work, we come back to the
Then we
board
come back.
for extra money.
Okay.
Does that sound like the intent?
Clearly got the understanding we want to cover, so that's fine. I think it's good.
Ready to vote? Sure. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank God we got Brian.
All right. Yes. Item number 2, motion to approve the proposal to update the reserve study by reserve advisors in the amount of $20,200, CROA replacement reserve expenditure.
So moved.
Thank you, Jackson. Second from Jack. Discussion.
Yeah, I would like, I know they did it before, I read this stuff here. Are they the only person we talked to? Are they the only person who's qualified? Did we not talk to other people? Why them? Why this price? We have a little history?
Yes, Reserve Advisors has a market share of community associations. They are very well known. They've been in business for many, many years. And this is another case of, if we go with another reserve study engineer, it's going to take them a lot of time to get up to speed on Celebration. We have a very big reserve study. The engineer that I've requested comes in, she specializes in large-scale communities, and she flies in from, I'm going to say Wisconsin or somewhere. She has done this twice, so she has some knowledge of our community to bring someone else in. We have not gone out to bid on this with anyone else. I will tell you, I did go out to bid on the next item 3 years ago, and it was like $19,000.
Versus the 7,200. So
Right.
so your opinion is, A, they're competent, B, you believe we're getting a very fair price because they know us?
They know us, they're familiar with our assets.
And the amount of time for them to get the work done will be significantly less because of their familiarity.
Okay, can we bounce down, Steve, to like page 72 of 340?
Is it this and the reserve stuff?
Yep. If you go to the reserve advisors, I'm gonna ask a specific question, but I want people to see it. So it's their scope of work.
Do you know which?
Yes, just click on the
Right there.
link.
Get that page there, all that.
Page 5?
You were, no.
Next one, next page.
Okay, so then, under Spring Lake Townhomes here, we're blowing it up so Jackson can read. But now you cut off the bottom that I wanted. Okay, under Spring Lake
So this is the scope of services here, and I looked at that, 'cause that's really what I thought was. And when I look at site components for all these, because we're doing an engineering study for us and all the service areas. Now, when you go to Spring Lake Townhomes, we're actually having them do balconies and railings. My question is, for you and for the board, is if they can do balconies and railings for Spring Park, why can't they do it for these other service areas so that it would be, we've sat here and we've talked about some of the construction defect issues and other things like that. Are we being short-sighted here when these guys could do a little bit more work and may give us more advantageous information? That's my question for anybody who can give me that answer.
Yeah. Okay. Only Oak Pond and Parkview have balconies that the service area is responsible for.
And it shows,
It shows,
service areas. It just doesn't say properties.
yeah, it doesn't say balconies.
It doesn't.
And actually, it ends up being the responsibility of the owner.
So my point for the board, my question is, if we can use this engineering study to get more and better information, even if it costs us a little more money, would that be wiser to do? That's the question I'm asking.
I mean, it makes sense.
Susan, do we have a lot of balconies that the service areas aren't responsible for?
The service areas are responsible for 5 things in general. And
The roof repairs and replacement, painting, landscape, irrigation, and termites. That's basically what that comes down to. And then there's some little things like cleaning and stuff. The service areas that have balconies would be Parkview and Oak Pond. And the supplemental says that while the service area would coordinate the work, that the responsibility is actually the owners.
So in Spring Lake, the supplemental documents call out the balconies and railings as service area responsibility.
Yes, but on the other ones, it's the owner responsibility.
This is based on the documents.
Can these ever change, those documents, for consistency?
I'm sorry?
Can those documents on a separate topic, for the service areas, can they ever be updated?
I think it's part of charter change.
it would be a charter change, yes.
Which would
Because I
require
go
legal
and I look back at
approvals.
something very simple and little, like the light on the house. And we've seen them come up and some need to be replaced or painted, and the owners assume, and I understand where they're coming from, that they pay their dues and that gets taken care of. But then they get surprised with a fine because it wasn't taken care of.
Well,
So they can review these things.
We can, and we put together a matrix a few years ago that we have posted on the website and that we constantly communicate to the homeowners there so that they can have better understanding, because it is complicated. We wouldn't say, go read your documents. We try to put it in a more user-friendly format for them to see.
It was approved by the board in 2015. But actually, the supplementals really are very basic in what they cover. But what's happened over time is that the things that aren't mentioned in there come up. Well, if painting's in there by the service area, then what about the light? Well, it doesn't specify the light. So what we've done with the aid of council is said, okay, here's what we know is in the supplemental. They will get painted on a painting cycle. You will get the roof replaced and repaired. You will have landscape and irrigation and a termite bond. Everything else is kind of not said. So over time, the board of directors, along with attorneys, have come up to answer those small questions that homeowners have had over time and made that matrix.
But when we're doing the charter review, we can look at the whole
more
picture.
specific question, that definitely will require legal opinion
that's fine,
on
yeah.
changing the
So
supplemental.
that goes on your master list.
And I know, that wasn't a takeaway, but that's understanding
Right.
Yep.
that part of the
I
document.
want to go back to Brian's question, though, because I think it's appropriate to ask. We're paying potentially $20,000 to this company. What would $25,000 get us in terms of looking at structure at a deeper level? I continue to see, as I think we all do, that every day we open up our email and we find out about another piece of property in Celebration that is potentially having structural problems, some of which are our responsibility, some of which are not. But should we get ahead of this? Would it be helpful to us from a management decision-making process to know more about what's really going on and what it would cost to repair these items?
Well, if I could just say a point, I would say because basically the owners own their building, they own their piece of land. That they are, homeowners think it's maintenance-free living, and they actually own that building and their property, that if we were to do something like that, that it would be to be aiding the homeowners, but it would ultimately be their, responsibility. But if you wanted to do that, it would be us kind of doing the research and aiding the service area as a whole with knowledge.
Susan and I were having a side conversation here. The reserve study is for wear and tear, life cycles of your amenities. It sounds like what you're asking, Jackson, maybe more of using, instead of spending more money on the reserve study, using dollars to hire a structural engineer to go and do a real look at the service area buildings.
But the reason I'm asking this question is even the condos pay CROA fees. So if you're paying CROA fees and you're sitting in condos and the beam structures are rusting out and you're having to move out of your condo because it wasn't properly taken for, at that point in time, when this starts happening often enough, it affects property values for everybody in town. So, and I know we got Jack and Debbie who've been on here for quite a while, so you can correct me if I'm just being nuts here, but is there some way we, during this process, can get better, stronger inspections to get us at least better information so that we know there's issues coming? And that's my question.
Yeah, and I think that that's probably geared more towards a structural engineer to go through and look at those CROA assets. The problem with the condos, and I agree with you, that if a condo association has a building that's failing, it will affect the overall value of homes throughout the rest of the community. The problem is it's not a CROA asset. While they pay their assessments, they're paying their assessments for the use of the common areas, the pools, the playgrounds, the brand new ball field complex, the special events, the insurance that the aesthetics will look nice on the facilities. But it's not a guarantee that their asset, that their building's gonna be done. They're responsible for having their own structural engineers or their own reserve studies. You don't even include them in your reserve study because it's not your asset.
It wouldn't even be any different than if it was a single-family homeowner.
Right.
Right? I mean, they own it. I own my own home. It'd be like me saying that you need to come in and inspect my home to see if it's safe.
Well,
So just to clarify, Jack's making a good point.
I'm just saying.
It's about a time frame.
Yeah, we're looking at every single thing that we actually have to pay for and what to replace, and that's what we're doing is finding out how long it's gonna last, when we have to replace it.
So we are not doing a structural engineering review of Heritage Hall.
No.
Or the Spring Park Pool.
No.
We are not looking at, they're not going in and seeing that it's deteriorating faster. Am I correct? They're just looking at the average age?
Spring Park Pool and the Spring Park Pool houses here, what are they doing then on those two items?
Well, because they are engineers, they do look at the structures. No destructive inspections of them, but a visual inspection, like the pool deck, the fencing, and they'll rate how many more years of expected life it has, and that's where they come up with the reserve recommendations and the cost associated with it. So they're more engineered towards costs and future costs and expected life.
to maintain. And I think one of the things that, as an example, the roofs at, it was the paint at Roseville Corner was scheduled, it had been 4 years, and they did the reserve study in 2016, and they said, that's not gonna last 7 years. We need to move that up at least 2 years, and we moved it up, and what it does, it affects the assessment for that particular service area, and they had a pretty significant increase in their assessment as a result. So all of these decisions affect not for the townhomes, not CROA's assessment, but the service area owners. And when you've got a unit that has 3 owners, they can be huge, the significant amounts. It was 44 in Roosevelt Corner.
So I guess that part of the question is, is there something that this group can do that's a deeper dive, but not a structural engineering study? Is that part of what we're asking? In the service areas, for example?
Yeah, that's the question I'm asking, because you just made the statement that it's not our money we're spending. We're doing the inspection and telling them they gotta do assessments more. And that's the question and if I'm just nuts, that's fine, tell me.
I would say that maybe-
I understand they own the property. I'm trying to find out if there's issues with the property, at least tell them.
I would think that maybe one idea would be maybe some communication out to the owners to do their own kind of hire some contractors to look at their units. I know just from working with the service area owners that, you know, one unit may be fine, like no issues, but then one on the corner, I know is a particular owner, because he's on the corner and the rain hits different ways with the construction joints and he's got a parapet wall, that he's had issues. And so he had to bring a contractor in. He had to have some work done on his townhomes. His responsibility, it's his home. But I think maybe the opportunity is there, and this was a conversation we had weekly on Spring Lake too, is homeowners educating them on, you know, what you can do preventative maintenance wise, what, you know, are some recommendations on having people come look at your home, you know, take a look at these certain things. It is 20 years old now. You know, some problems that may develop in the industry, you know, may be worth, you know, you getting someone else to take a look. And we have some vendors that work in town.
Yeah, let me offer this to you. The reserve study is mission critical. We have to do it. So I think that it's in your best interest to approve this tonight and let us move forward with that. And then let me get with the team to put our heads together, reach out through CAI forums and see if there's anybody else that's hiring any specialist on more structural, more in-depth structural engineering for the buildings. And we'll see if we can come up with something else to look at that.
That's just
it's
not going to be a CROA
It's not going to solve your the condo association problems, though. This or a structural engineer on your side will not solve what's going on with those condo associations.
And from the homeowner's standpoint, well, it's not going to solve the individual homeowners' problems, which
doesn't do
also
anything.
brings down our community as well. It's very simple. If you wanted a very well-built house, I'm not going to say further than that.
Yeah.
You can apply what it's going to.
But yeah, we'll see what the best use of the dollars are to try and accomplish what you're looking for. But I think it's critical that we move forward with this reserve study. Do we have a motion?
We do have a motion, yes.
There's a motion and a second.
Yeah, motion's up.
We can call the vote. I mean,
Ready
I'm
to call?
perfectly fine with that. I'm just more, this may lead into our Monday discussion more.
Yeah. And there may be some add-on after your investigation.
Well, I've got a note here to ask. Nick Brenneman is the person that does the bids, and to ask him if they can do a more intensive study and what it would cost to identify structural issues that may fall outside the normal maintenance of the buildings.
And then I think it is a conversation, is CROA going to subsidize for the service areas, or are you just looking at CROA assets?
But if you do that for another homeowner, you're going to have to do it for the single family too.
It's definitely something you all want to discuss. I mean, we've had this philosophical conversation come up about multiple different things that are taking place within the community.
So that's a good discussion, and we can do an add-on if we need it. All right, ready to call a question? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item, item 3, motion to approve the proposal to perform an insurance appraisal in conjunction with a reserve study update by reserve advisors in the amount of $7,600, CROA replacement reserve expenditure.
So moved.
Jack's moved.
Second.
Second from Brian. We've had a little bit of discussion on this from Susan 10, 15 minutes ago.
Brian, just to be clear, we're not planning to do this until we get a little further into the year so that we've got the ball fields as part of the property to be appraised.
Exactly. I've asked them, and that's why they're asking me to give them a decision. I've asked them for the last week in April, because I want to make sure the ball fields are substantially complete so that they can make a determination on the maintenance of that based on the structures.
And based on that appraisal, would that impact the insurance valuations?
It may.
So it's possible that we might have to come back and revise our insurance coverage based on this appraisal?
Yeah, it'd just be an
Would
amendment
it
of
be-
the coverage. I mean, it wouldn't be material, but.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 5, motion to approve the reserve resolution as prepared by Attorney Slayton.
Motion to approve.
Motion from Debbie. Second from Vaughn. So this was in the packet, and then the red line materials that were modifications to what was initially prepared, and that was late this afternoon, approved by Attorney Slayton.
Right, right.
So-
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Brian.
This is for the sake of good order. We've discussed all these through the planning process, that basically we've got the replacement and repair reserves, we've got the capital improvement, we already passed the motion to move the surplus into that, and then this formally says contingency reserve will be set at $500,000. We'll get there and then we'll top it off with a rollover going into the working capital fund. The working capital fund and the contingency reserve are not restricted funds. We have the ability as a board to make business decisions in emergencies or whatever else may come up. But it puts a structure to it versus Brian just talking about it.
And this would be binding on future boards unless they chose to rescind the resolution and write a new one. Is that correct?
I think this should be mapped out as part of the March meeting too, as what was put in place and how it works. And probably, I don't think we really went over the financials in the March meeting, but I think there should be a financial presentation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it stands until modified.
Right. I just want to make clear that it's not a yearly, you got to go back and revisit it.
No.
I mean, part of what we're trying to do here
Structural.
is to set a long-term approach to the way that we're doing business for the homeowners.
Call a vote?
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 6, we removed that. That was about the Technology Committee resolution. And just in my review of it, we got the board book. We have that on the workshop for Monday to look at it. And my view is to make it consistent with other resolutions for the other committees, the other standing committees. So we'll discuss that Monday. Items 7 and 8, we removed. That was about the lifelong learning contract. It's been in place for a year and to renew it for 20
I
years.
asked that those be removed only because
Please.
the two contracts should be identical for the two organizations. They are not. The intent was to make them the same, but the practices that they were written at different times and different templates, and I think for consistency purposes, they should be the same. So I've asked that it go back to legal.
Okay.
And just to add on to that, we will get those cleaned up and brought back in December, but my recommendation will be the same in December as it would have been tonight. They're very good partners with us. Both are thriving, no pun intended, programs that are great with the low capacity during the day. It's a great filler for the building, and it's a great, wonderful program for the community, so we're going to recommend that.
You're just saying that because you have the record now for the highest attended class. So, congratulations.
I would also, on like they also state like that they're going to buy the equipment and everything. I think there's also been a turnover equipment. I think they need to be updated for, okay, here's the facts as of today.
But again, part of what we're
literally
trying-
reads like last year's
Yeah,
contract.
it looks like last year's just with a new
Get a
date.
certain level, you said consistency. I would like to see our legal agreements have not only consistency, but they just reflect what we are doing rather than just having been sort of carried along from year to year. So that's all we're doing.
Yeah, and it's my sense that these are technical reviews and that the substance of what we want is good collaboration. We want good grounding in the documents, but we really love the collaboration. I'll speak for myself and other boards can speak. The collaboration with the foundation has been great. These are tremendous offerings for our community, a great asset for us.
They are, and the capital improvements that they made to the 851 building are TV that we get a lot of usage out of for our meetings. These are just an example.
Jack, I can't see it.
Yeah, I would well,
I just have to
another discussion.
Magnification.
Put that in the facilities master plan. Can we move to item 9? Motion to renew a one-year, actually, can we combine 9 to 16?
9 through 16.
Yeah,
Can we combine them all?
Wait, is there going to be any discussion on 13?
13 was the,
Let's combine,
let's pull it separate.
Okay,
But I
pull it
need a
separate.
discussion on 14.
13 or 14?
It's 14, you mean 14, tennis.
Yeah, 14, I'm sorry.
So let's combine items 9 to 13, and then 15 and 16.
So moved.
That's from Brian and Jack second. Any discussion?
Call the question.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Now we have item 14, which is the one-year contract option to renew with tennis. Is recommended by the Recreation Committee.
moved.
Do we have a motion from Jack? Thank you.
Second.
And from Brian is the second.
I'd like to ask, since I don't want to overreact to comments from one resident. On the other hand, this is a big program, and I think Dory is absolutely right in her support of the program and what the committee has done. Dory, could I just ask, would the Recreation Committee be willing to revisit and look again at the tennis items in light of the comments that were made here tonight and come back to us with a recommendation again?
Jackson, can I ask, on a bigger picture though, this conversation took place in 2016, and it was what led to the formation of the Recreation Task Force that turned into the Recreation Program Plan and where we are today. So I think that the question is on a bigger scale of, are we a community where we embrace programming and having program offerings through program partnerships, and if so, every other item that you just approved fits into that. Tennis to me, when you look at it from that mindset, is no different than the use of these rooms. The rooms aren't just open for anybody to just walk in here and set up a meeting. And there are 2 courts that we're leaving open on a regular basis. So I think the question would be, do we want to, I wouldn't minimize court, I wouldn't take away courts from them, because then you're stifling the program and they'll probably go somewhere else, and then we won't have a good, strong tennis program provider. So I think the question is, during those peak times, what is the usage on those other 2 courts? Do we want to move towards letting residents have exclusive use by renting them? Do we want people to pay $4 an hour and let them rent it for the hour and have the usage of it?
I guess that's
Those
what I
are the
wanted the
questions I think
Recreation
we need to
Committee
look
to
at.
address. I mean, I've been the liaison to that committee. I've sat through the committee meetings. I'm extremely impressed with every member of that committee and the work that they're doing. However, my understanding of the contracts that were submitted for approval was that there was none of the discussion that you're just describing to me right now. It may have happened in 2016, I gather it did. And I'm just wondering whether or not it's appropriate to ask the committee for their view. I think, again, our position should be deference to the committees, whether it's recreation or it's events or anything else. I would just like to have an additional month of to go back and review. And if the committee comes back to us and says, yep, we're still happy with this, then great. And if not, then let's see if there's something else.
The only thing I would ask is, it seems like we've got a potential, I don't know how clear it is, but a potential conflict based upon the success of the program. That's a good thing. So is there any way to look at how the courts are scheduled? So, at the end of the day, I don't want the board managing this, I want the Recreation Committee managing this. I agree with that 100%. Is there any way to look at the usage, and do people, like the 2 that were here tonight, have the ability to book in advance to make sure they can get some time? That's all I'm asking.
Right, and I think that it's a good point, Jackson, but I guess my main point to this is that the board has appointed a Recreation Committee to carry out a plan of a methodology of the board, which is to have strong, high-quality programs. To ask the committee if what they're doing is of value to the community based on the direction of the board.
I'm just asking them to revisit the questions that were asked tonight. I think that there's a precedential value here. As we start to look at the ball fields, we're going to be faced with some comparable questions down the road about usage of the ball fields. I would rather that we take 30 days more and think it through and come back, and I don't doubt that we're going to approve this ultimately. I would just like this committee that we've appointed, which I think has wonderful experience, to tell us, yeah, we've looked at this and we're thinking about it in light of the ball fields, and here's where we still are. Now, Dory, if you disagree, this is the time to say so.
So well, as Dory's thinking about whether she disagrees, is there another way of, can we approve this because there are still 2 courts available, and have the committee look at issues such as reservations and costs?
Yes, I think that makes sense.
And then it doesn't change the contract, but still charge the committee to look at the concerns that were raised.
I'm fine with that.
I hate to take something though that they're paying the fees for and they're expecting free usage of, and they're having to suddenly pay a reservation fee.
What's the difference between that and wanting the activity room? There's dance classes in there every night.
I think there's a little difference, and I would say, I mean, I don't want to jump on that residents came here to a board meeting, voice opinion, and boom, we change everything around. But if they did know the right course of action, and that's educating the community, they would have most likely been to a Recreation Committee meeting first, shared their concerns. The Recreation Committee would have discussed it, and then it would have come to us.
They have. The Finneys have been here the last 3 years around this time frame to talk to you about this. It's a bigger question. It's a philosophical question. Are you a recreation program provider, or are you just our facilities are open and people can walk onto them and use them? And this is the conversation that's taken place over the last 3 or 4 years on what you want this to be. And I think you're seeing the fruits of the labor over the last 4 years. The program is showing that an average of 49 students a month, it's growing, and that's what we want. We wanted a win-win program partnership, provide high quality so that the program continues to grow.
And these aren't just residents that are participating.
There is, in the recreation program plan, there's strict rules on residents having priority booking and a lower fee for programs than non-residents.
So the tennis people bring in outside people into their classes?
Only after residents have the opportunity
to fill those spots.
Fill the spots first.
Okay.
Priority goes to residents then.
Right.
I don't feel, just speaking for myself right now, comfortable making a decision on this because I don't think I'm fully educated on it. I know something popped up, and I know previous boards 3 years ago may have made a certain decision. I don't know if it's a bad thing to put it off a month.
Well, if I could just add one more, so Ms.
Just so I
Finney,
fully
Ms.
understand.
Finney asked a question about the pool. Item number 13 is a swim lesson taking place in the pool. If I want to just go and do lap swim in the lanes that the little fins are there, I can't. It's being programmed during that time. So yes, the pool is in the same scenario as tennis courts.
I mean, earlier this year we had issues with the pool, so I think we all got a little educated on the pool side, and we heard feedback. I don't know. I'm not against this.
Well, let me ask this. If we approve this tonight, is there any objection on the board to me going back as liaison to the Recreation Committee and asking for more information and discussion about where we go with this going forward, and then presenting that back to the board? Would that be acceptable?
I think that's fine, or I think we as a board are already charging them, whether you actually go or not. We're asking them to look at this, look at costs, look at reservations, look at other alternatives.
Because we need to understand if the tennis courts are overbooked just because there's so much demand, that affects how we think even about a parks and facilities plan
Absolutely.
that we're talking about later. Maybe we're going to need 2 more courts as we think about the future. It's just good information.
And I think you need to ask the question, do we allow residents to have exclusive use of those courts through a rental process? If you want to ensure that the hour that you want to be there is open, rent them out. I mean, I worked in Seminole County where I had 52 tennis courts. There is a reservation system that you can put in place for tennis.
$4 is less if he pays for his coffee in the morning.
That's what we charge. We charge $4 an hour to use the tennis courts.
I mean, does that
but the residents are paying for it
transfer
through
to
their
have to
use.
rent to swim? And, I mean, I hate to have it where retired residents are gonna have an additional thing to look at.
It is, but the board does have the ability to set rules, and the rules that were set in place by
Okay.
prior boards were so that you could have higher quality programming.
We ready to vote? Call the question. All in favor of the motion, item 14, as it's written, say aye, please. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. So we are moving forward, though, with the further discussion.
So the minutes will reflect that Jackson is going to come back to the board, and the Recreation Committee will come back to us to talk about what they've looked.
And we've had an increase in programs since that 2016?
Yes, I mean,
So these facilities are being taxed
Yes.
even more
Yeah,
than they were in the
and
past.
they're marketed through our magazine, so if you're a family looking for a community that offers strong programming, you're seeing it through Celebration now, and I think that was the vision of the board, to make sure that we do have these quality programs.
Good problem.
It's a good problem. Item 17, motion to approve rebuild of trellises at Academy Row Meeting House Green by Empire Works in the amount of $10,359 from Academy Row Meeting House Green Service Area Replacement Reserve Expenditure.
So moved.
Thank you from Jackson.
Second.
Second from Kevin, I think.
Any questions for us?
We discussed this at workshop.
Yeah.
We did.
Yep. Any, ready to vote? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to approve invoices for roof repairs by Performance Roofing in the amount of $1,500, South Village Service Area Replacement Reserve Expenditure.
I'd like
like to motion to move to combine 18 and 19.
18 and 19? Yeah. Okay, so that would be the roof repairs by Performance Roofing in the amount of $1,500 per Blue Sage service area replacement reserve.
So moved.
So moved from Brian to combine,
Second.
and
Second.
Jack is seconding, combining 18 and 19. Any discussion? Thank you for being ready for comments.
I'm so ready.
Call the question, all in favor? All in favor? Aye. Any
I know
opposed?
that, I know that.
Motion carries. Item 20, motion to ratify the approval of the reserve fund expenditure for purchase of new dining room furniture and refurbishment of tall back dining chairs, as approved by Artisan Park Committee at their meeting on November 7th, 2018.
So moved.
From Jackson.
Wait,
and
how much is this?
How much?
16,598.
I saw it in the,
Yes.
in the
It's
documentation.
artisan money from the
It was
artisan.
artisan money, item 20.
All right,
It's-
that's spent then.
Yeah, it's
The-
16,000.
What's the amount? I couldn't download the box.
They had for a.
$16,598.74 from Cheney Brothers. Jackson motioned, and was Vaughn a second or no?
I can be.
You want to be?
Be a second.
You want to be? Okay, Vaughn second. All right, any further discussion? Or any discussion?
It says other vendors unknown, so they only did.
No, the process,
I'm just asking.
It wasn't in
for
their
the
board
record.
packet.
the process was that they went to a number of vendors.
Got it.
Cheney Brothers is the overarching
That's right.
vendor because they get a discount, so the actual furniture supply company is somebody different.
It doesn't mean that they didn't know the vendors.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 21, motion to approve two attorney recommended write-offs for $95.14.
So moved.
From Jack and Debbie with the second. Any discussion? Management did recommend,
It's an attorney.
or attorney?
Yeah, we know.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We removed item 22 for next month.
23 through 25 together?
Let's do 23 to 25. Engaging Cole and Associates for the 2018 CROA audit, CJC audit, and CCS tax return in the amounts of $10,900 for the first one, $3,000 for the second one, and $750 for the third one, and from their respective operating expenditures.
So moved.
That's from Debbie and Brian second. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board comments.
It's not 9 o'clock yet. We
Besides,
can't leave.
besides Happy Thanksgiving, safe travels. Jack's moved to, any board comments from anyone? Happy Thanksgiving, safe travels, move to adjourn.
Thanksgiving, we have a meeting on Monday.
We got
Meeting
something
on
Monday.
Monday. Oh,
Yeah, would you give us a day off?
that's a good idea. Okay, we're adjourned. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you all.